Dato' Hamza has actually arrived, so in a minute.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Halima Mohammed Said, and I represent this civil, or rather citizen movement called Association of Voices of Peace, Conscience, and Reason. And our stance is definitely moderate. We are not an NGO, as I explained to the ambassador here. We prefer to be known as a citizen movement because it has less connotations, right? Less negative connotations. Right, I just want to say that I agree totally with what you said earlier, Dr. Saifuddin, that we have entered into this era of great extremes. Here it is extreme, yeah? Social consciousness, the floodgates to human rights are open, and everybody has views about everything. And I'm a keen, follower of Facebook, not Twitter, because I think tweeting is trivial. I prefer, longer postings and explanatory stuff rather than just to state a point of view. So I agree that the floodgates are open, and one of the main features of this floodgate is human rights and all that is associated with it, plus LGBT and so on. So because of this, masses of dissenting views, some negative, some extremist, some provocative, some conciliatory, I think the stance of moderation, what I understand the stance of moderation to be, is a stance of compromise. To me, moderation at the very practical, pragmatic level of decision-making, of political undertaking is compromise, as with the Allah issue. Although, when I surf the net and surf the Facebook comments and so on, there are all kinds of backing and explanation, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Quranic, and so on, regarding Allah, right? And the word Allah. But many take the view that, because the Arabs, because the Christians and Muslims in the Middle Eastern countries use Allah interchangeably, it's okay. But we're not in the Middle East, and I agree totally with Tansri that you must look at the context of how the word Allah is perceived and used in Malaysia among the Malay Muslims. So I think that the government has taken or has approached the whole issue by suggesting a compromise. While the Sabahans and Sarakians are allowed to continue with this, a century-old use of Allah in the Bible and so on, the herald, just the herald should not be using the word in future publications in Bahasa Malaysia. So I think compromise is the way forward for GMMOF as well as PCOL, my association. Thank you.
Thank you, Datin Halima. I must allow those who have not spoken yet. I see the Deputy High Commissioner from the UK.
Deputy Secretary, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come here. And it's good to be able to speak in the presence of the Deputy Foreign Minister, Datuk Hamza. We've listened in the first session to a sort of very, and rightly so, a very Malaysian-centric view of moderation of the organization and the challenges that Malaysia faces, and I find it very interesting to listen to that. I just want to pause a moment and obviously from a perspective of being the Acting British High Commissioner here, speak a little bit from how we view the initiative taken by the Prime Minister initially in New York. What I wanted to say is that this initiative, when it was launched, certainly gripped our imagination. And we saw the opportunity and we saw the aims that your Prime Minister was seeking to pursue, namely a voice of moderation in a global context, a voice that would combat the extremist message and crowd out that particular space, because I think one of the challenges we've had for a number of years, and Britain has faced both terrorist attacks and threats from a number of regions of the world. My last posting was Pakistan, I saw it very directly, was that the extremists were getting all the attention. It was their actions, it was their rhetoric that was gripping and grabbing the imagination of a lot of young people who were very open to their particular message. So when a leader comes along, and particularly a Muslim leader, and starts to send very much the opposite message, that suicide and suicide bombing is wrong and is counter to the faith, that we hope, sends a very positive signal, and it's also one that the British government wants to support in strong measure. So when our Prime Minister came here last year for his first bilateral visit, we made a centrepiece of that visit, both our Prime Minister and your Prime Minister being on the same stage in Nottingham to further promote and promote jointly the messages contained in Prime Minister Najib's initial speech. So we support it strongly. The one point I would like to make, though, that's very relevant, yes, it's important, and the first stage is very much to state very clearly and work out very clearly what the vision is. What is moderation about? Essentially, in its most simplistic form, as I've said, it's about countering extremism. But it's fine to set out the principle, to look at it from an academic point of view, but you have to take that position and use it in a practical way around the world. And I think where you develop the brand, where you get attention for the initiative and for what GMF stands for, is by taking specific examples of extremist actions and commenting on them early and robustly. And you will certainly get British government support when you do so, and I think you'll get support from the vast majorities of countries around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can I move to the second line? I saw a lady's hand just now. Did I see? Yeah. Okay, there are two ladies' hands. You decide among you which one comes first. Please.
On behalf of Everyone Malaysia, I would like to thank you very much for this invitation.
Your name, sister?
My name is Hayan Ishan, and I am from Nottingham University. What I'd like to know is there are many perceptions of moderation, and would like to know is there a way for us to, as an international community with LEDCs, MBDCs, which for to define moderation that could suit anyone regardless of where they're from or what they are.
Okay, that's a question. Can I take that as a question?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I will welcome anyone from within this hall to try and answer that. I wouldn't want to try and answer that for myself. Yes, did I see Edin? Next, Dr. Fagit,
Sorry. Yeah, I've got a comment on a few things. I'll make it quite brief. Basically, a lot of the issues that an organization is going to be like this is going to be dealing with. We live in a world where our crisis is essentially subliminal. Our problems are cultural and psychological. And many of the kind of institutional means by which we are trying to grapple with these problems just do not seem to work. I think the Kalima Allah in this country is one of those issues. We are essentially dealing with subliminal psychologies. One of the great challenges, I think, for this global movement of moderates is really to define what you mean by moderates. Because within the entire debate that has been going on since 9/11, especially enhanced since 9/11, the issue of the moderate is today actually quite exhausted. And what this organization needs to do is really give a redefinition of what moderation is, who moderates are. And I think one of the major things you need to consider is that you do not define the moderate in antithesis to the extremists. You need to identify the kind of extremism that is being institutionalized, that is in the form of conditioning of all kinds in institutions. And it's, since we do live in a Muslim country, it is a problem that Muslim countries seriously need to think about. There are issues, for example, of victimology, a culture of victimology among Muslims, among Malays in this country that need to be grappled with. There are many issues that a group like this will seek to advocate, that the nominal and the common ulama and masjid imam and members in Jakim and so on need to understand, and in many instances, I'm sorry to say that, I don't think they're even capable of understanding some of the very complex issues that need to be dealt with. So I think there needs to be a great deal of political will. I think we have to be very candid and honest in saying that there's a lot of doublespeak when it comes to the issue of moderation. I think there needs to be a lot of questioning. There needs to be a real reattachment and a real almost forensic dealing with aspects of Islamic history, of a broader education of the populace as a whole. There must, of course, be a great deal of empathy. And if I can just use the Allah issue just to illustrate the point very briefly, it's an issue that should never have gone to court. And once it went to court, it should have been thrown out because it's not within the jurisdiction of the legal establishment to decide who and what people call their God. There are major issues here. There are theological issues that have nowhere been debated. There are sociological issues that are nowhere near debated. There is the issue of perhaps Christians are trying to proselytize among Muslims. Well, we live in a world where that is going to happen. And we need to discover ways and means in which those realities can be acknowledged. One point here, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. And facts and statistics prove that it is the fastest growing religion in the world, principally in the West. In the West, where Muslims can interact within a climate of freedom. I think, as we talk about global moderates, as we begin to engage and deal with the issue of moderation, we must also deal with issues of fundamental freedoms, of liberties, in a country where today the word liberal, the word secular is a pejorative word. Yeah, we cannot even want to use that word. I remember organizing a debate between YB Nurul Izzah and YB Saifuddin just prior to the May 5th general election. And the title I gave was, "Is a liberal politics possible in contemporary Malaysia?" And both the participants, I'm sorry to say, reminded me to change it to a progressive politics, because they didn't want to deal with the specter of the word liberal. Now, within this organization, I'm hoping that really the challenge is to give a redefinition of what the term moderate is, and really we need as broad a discussion as we possibly can, and we must have the gall and the political will to conduct it in a way that is both lucid, lyrical, and rational. If that is not achieved, then it's just another gestural movement. Thank you.
I'm progressively liberal. Sorry. Then I'll move to IB and then Dr. Stephen Leong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume this is the time to bring up specific issues. Beginning the more general issue of moderation, I think in the case of, at least in Islamic tradition, it's not so much the problem of definition of moderation, which is unclear. It is a very clear definition. The idea of wasat or wasatiyah. It's part of Islamic tradition. The real difficulty, of course, is in the area of implementation or application, and the apparent lack of shame on the part of politicians and leaders to be hypocritical and have double standards. When we look at the definition of moderation, it is there in Islamic tradition. Let me please give an example. This is the issue that I want to raise. This concerns the demonization and the beginnings of what looks like an inquisition against Malaysia's Shiite population, of about 250 to 300,000 people. According to the government itself, the population of Shiites in Malaysia, consisting mainly of Malays, but also to a smaller extent Malaysians of Indian origin, and some even smaller numbers of Malaysians who are products of marriages with Iranians and Iraqis. According to Shiites themselves, the number is probably higher, closer to 300, 350,000, maybe even 400,000 Malaysians. So we're not talking about a tiny minority of Malaysians who are Shiites. Now, a number of declarations and conventions, such as the Amman Message, to which Malaysia is signatory, declares the four Sunni schools, as well as the Ja'fari and Zaidi and some other schools of thought, jurisprudential schools of thought, as legitimate to practice in Islam. Many prominent authorities among the ulama of the Sunnis have regarded the Ja'fari and other Shiite schools as legitimate in Islam. The most famous, of course, is fatwa issued in the 1950s by Sheikh Mahmud Shaltut, Sheikh Al-Azhar, and there are many others. There are too many of these for me to list here. I suppose the main point is that the dominant view of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah has always been historically to accept the Shiites as a legitimate school of thought, even though they had serious theological differences with the Shiites. But it is not something common in Islamic history that you see among religious authorities demonizing another sect, such as the Ja'fari or Shiite sect. But what we have been seeing in Malaysia in the last several years, but in particular the last few months, has been a cocktail of lies and half-truths and misunderstandings with regard to Shiism being reported in our media. This is already bad enough, but to make things worse, you have now legislation that allows, at least in some states, Shiites to be arrested. And indeed, Shiites have been arrested. Malaysian Shiites have been arrested for possessing Shiite literature. Some of the literature that they've been arrested for, I'm familiar with. They are by no means propaganda. They are theological or religious works. Shiites have also been hauled up by religious authorities to explain why they are Shiite and to explain their activities. It is indeed alarming that this can happen in Malaysia. It does not even happen in the more extremist countries that we, in the Middle East, where you have actually violent conflict between Shiites and Sunnis. But even in such countries, you don't have such extreme legislation against a minority sect. My point, I suppose, there's so many issues to get into, but my point is this. Being against Shiism and having legislation against Shiism is not only a matter of human rights, or violation of the human rights of a legitimate minority in Islam. It is also against the tradition of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which our religious authorities are claiming to protect. Because the dominant position of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah throughout history has been to regard Shiism as legitimate. At least some of the Shiite sects as legitimate, certainly the dominant ones, the Ja'fari and the Zaidi. Therefore, what is happening in Malaysia today, as far as Shiism is concerned, shows an extremist tendency in the country. It is not an extremist tendency that is displayed by a minority of extremists, but it is an extremist tendency displayed by religious authorities who have power in this country. And this extremist tendency is not only against the dominant position of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but it also is a position against most views on the nature of human rights and how human rights should be put into practice. my plea really is to civil society organization and certainly to global movement of moderate foundation is to take this issue seriously. In the last few months, we have our international image has taken a serious beating just on this issue alone. And people have to realize, Muslims in this country have to realize, and everybody has to realize, that this movement against Shiism is only the tip of the iceberg. Those groups and organizations, the international NGOs, the international Islamic groups, the local ones as well, which are against Shiism, are also against other aspects of Islam that are firmly entrenched in the religious life of this country. For example, Sufism has come under attack. Various aspects of Malay culture that's been going on for quite a long time are under attack also from similar groups that are against Shiism. Shiism is the first target, probably the first casualty in terms of legislation, in terms of the move by religious authorities. But I don't think it is inconceivable that other aspects of Islam in this country will also come under attack, and there may be even legislation against it. In fact, many people know, and those who have studied these things, and some of the religious scholars in this country understand that for quite a long time, at least for the last 20 years or so, there has been an undercurrent among extremists to criticize various aspects of Malay culture. Many practices of the Malays that have been part and parcel of the cultural landscape of the region for centuries are said to be innovations and that should be done away with. Sufism, which defines the nature of Islam in the region, is also increasingly coming under attack. So there is no way that we can, propagate moderation in Malaysia without dealing with the gradually increasing power of religious extremism among the religious authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Farid. Ivy?
Thank you, Dato. Very quickly, I just would like GMM and that means all of us too, to define what does moderation mean in Malaysia. Very much like Animal Farm, where all animals are equal, and then the expression and said, but some are more equal than others. Does moderation in Malaysia mean that some are more equal than others? I'm asking this in a very sincere manner, because I think it's really important for us to have that discussion, whether we have the opportunity to speak freely about. I would like to convince, Malay Muslims that the use of the word Allah will not be a threat to Islam. I want to have that space to be able to say that. It's all well and good to say CSOs should speak up, CSOs should speak up. Actually, we have been speaking up, but we have not given the opportunity to speak up, or we are lots of, police reports are made against us, because there's a whole issue of human rights defenders in this country. Once you do speak up, and I have also been, at the brunt of that, there are threats to our lives, there are police reports made against us. So I think one of the very important strategies and values is freedom of expression. To be able to speak freely, and hopefully also in Bahasa Malaysia, because again, we're sitting here speaking in English, and I would like to urge for that, to be able to have more freedom of expression and figure out strategies of how we can create those spaces, especially in Bahasa Malaysia, speaking spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. Dr. Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen Leong from University Tunku Abdul Rahman. I must say I've learned a lot from our panelists, providing different perspectives on moderation. While we're grappling for a good definition, perhaps as the days go by, we will be able to come up with something. But generally, I think we would all be agreed to the fact that it's not extremist, it's somewhere in the middle. The Chinese say 中庸, the middle path. And while there has been talk about overseas promoting moderation, but then we look towards back home, our own backyard, and then we are reminded that we should in fact begin with the family, begin at home. That is important, there's no doubt about that. But my own sense is that, and I mentioned this before elsewhere, that when you look at it, there's a tendency to rely on others, to feel that, well, I could do something on my own, but it's up to the others, the CSOs and so on. But if you really want to get something done, and it is possible, it is doable, it is deliverable, and that is to look at the self, the individual. Beginnings at home, charity begins at home. Home has several members, but it's the personality, the individual. And if the individual can tell himself that today I want to make a difference, I want to be a moderate, I don't want to be an extremist, it doesn't cost anything. The moment you decide, the moment I decide, I feel that the world itself has progressed one iota. And then you multiply it with millions and so on. So that's very important. But while the CSOs play a very important role, and they should continue to do so, how can we get this message across to the individuals, the families, and so on? Okay? Religious organizations can play a role, cultural organizations, undoubtedly. Okay? And now that we're looking inward, Malaysia, and this controversy over Kalimah Allah, I can understand the Muslims' concerns, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that when it comes to a religious issue, ultimately, it becomes the individual and his creator. And therefore, the basic question I ask myself is this: is there only one creator, or are there other creators? Did God create only Muslims, or did God create non-Muslims as well? And would God want to see division? While we have different concepts of God, Christians, it's pointed out, they say, oh, Trinity and so on. Then Muslims are very sacred. Okay? And the Sikhs themselves have their own concept of God. You can have different concepts, but there's only one God. And my sense is that God wouldn't mind if others use the same name for him. This would bring about unity. Dr. Zefris brought out Vision 2020. That was 22 years ago. ISIS promoted it, and Dr. Mahathir acknowledged and gave thanks to ISIS for this. It was fantastic. It took the world by storm. The year 2020, internationally, APEC, everything else, became 2020 and so on. Now when we look at it, and we just heard the quote, Bangsa Malaysia, how close are we to that? I think we're far away from that. So, but never too late. We can come back and we can strive again. So whatever it is, it's good to have the stakeholders here speaking their mind, trying to understand one another so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The lady at the back, the young one. And then after that, yeah. Okay, again you have to take a vote. Maybe you show your ID and who's younger. And then I will invite His Excellency, the Ambassador, and then Ban, and then I see Anas.
All right. Hi, my name is Xiao, and I'm representing MUN Malaysia. So you guys are probably all going to question that. What is MUN? So I'm just going to give a brief explanation of what MUN is. MUN stands for Model United Nations, and it's for students between 11 and 25 who take the role as delegates of the United Nations, and they simulate committees in the UN, such as the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Human Rights Council, and they find solutions to the world's problems, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. MUN aims to find solutions to build a consensus. And there's been a lot of talk in this floor, I can see, about the problems facing moderation in Malaysia. There are religious problems, cultural problems, but in all this, what we lack in Malaysia is a free space in which we can voice our views, a free space where dissent is tolerated, where speaking against is promoted. And that's where MUN comes in, and that's where MUN Malaysia comes in. MUN Malaysia is a soon-to-be social enterprise, largely thanks to the efforts of Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, so thank you very much, sir. And we aim to provide this space, and I think that it is movements like this that should be promoted within Malaysia. A free space where people are allowed to voice their opinions, where students, the youth, the leaders of tomorrow are allowed to take on the role of delegates, are allowed to criticize issues such as LGBT rights, controversial issues like these, which would not be spoken of in normal discourse. And I believe that the GMM's future should be inherently closely tied to movements such as this, youth movements, social movements, movements that aim to build critical thinkers for tomorrow, movements that will allow students, allow youth to internalize the issues that they are debating. Just now, Mr. Leong, I think, mentioned the idea of the individual as the beginning, and this is what MUN allows. This is what movements like this allow students to internalize issues that affect the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, please.
Thank you. I just like to express my appreciation for being invited to participate in this GMM discussion on how we are to promote moderation for promoting peace and security. Well, as a Buddhist, the word moderation is about to the word middle path. Of course, this is the basic principle of how we are to live in peace and harmony. The history has shown that the extreme on every issue have been about the confrontation. Just to mention about the bipolar world after the Second World War, communism and capitalism, they are pursuing their goal on the extreme side. So that means the world is not coming to term. In terms of economic, of course, financial crisis repeatedly occur because it did not follow the middle path or moderation. If one country or group of countries have been trying to make world become on their own interest, then the financial crisis occur repeatedly. Of course, moderation, I suppose that today is the most important path that we should pursue, but it's about the matter how we are to do it. Of course, Thailand also experienced a long confrontation domestically. We have this political conflict. Of course, the government and opposition, and all those conflicts that bring trouble to the country. Out of this extremists. And I think if we are to pursue the moderation, of course, religion, I'd just like to also ask what is the word moderate Islam in Malaysia mean. Religion is not to be abused, to use as the mean for causing violence. So these are all the things that we should follow. It's easier speak than done. Implementation of moderation is the key to bring peace and security and justice. Of course, reconciliation has been the word that we are trying to use to overcome all those dispute conflict. But it's very difficult. Why? Because once everyone still attached to their own thinking and mindset, I don't know how we are to go about this pursuit of peace and security and justice for all. Of course, the participation of all civil society is also important means for promoting this concept of moderation. If we use the word government and opposition, then it becomes like two sides. So how we are to find a common mean or middle path to go about our way to find peace. King Bhumibol of Thailand have introduced the theory of sufficiency economy after Thailand have suffered all the financial crisis. So moderation is a mean to have the sustainable economic development. Also in the environment, if you are to over-exploit the environment, then certainly we won't have anything left for our next generation. So this is the remark that I'd like to share with you, how we are to define or to push forward this noble goal of GMM to promote moderation. Thank you.
Thank you, Yours. Let's see. Anas?
Thank you, Dr. I'd like to...
sorry, I promised one. After Boon will be Anas.
Yes, thank you, Dr. One of the key points here, I think, is the articulation of the terms of moderation by the top leadership of the country. That is often, again, another elephant in the room. And if this is done consistently, then we will have a much more, I think, a progressive situation. I'd like to endorse what the Acting High Commissioner of Britain said earlier about coming up with clear expressions against acts or statements that are immoderate by extremist fringe groups. If this is replied to comprehensively, consistently, and robustly all the time, from the very top leadership down, I think we would have a much more promising situation. We had that up to about 10 years ago. And it coincides with the time when, as it was expressed earlier in this morning, that Malaysia was looked up to in the rest of the developing world. But that seemed to be a turning point about up to a decade ago. Now, if there is this consistent articulation by the top leadership on issues of extremism and the need for moderation, to set the limits, to set the terms of the debate, the terms of the issues, to set the boundaries and the limits, then I think a lot can be done, because everyone else in the country would fall in line and have to contend with what has been said by the top leadership and has to adjust to it. Now, what is the alternative? Without that clear and firm articulation from the top down, what we have are the fringe extremist groups getting into the act, and they are the ones who set the terms, who set the boundaries and the limits, if any. And that is a clear, I think, distinction as to what is to be done and what is to be avoided. Also, on a political level, it should naturally be wise and productive for politicians to have the space to be the first to set the terms of the issues and the debate, because then they would carry the silent majority with them, and that would in turn create vast political dividends for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Anas?
Peace, I'm Anas. I'm a businessman. Incidentally, I have a book called, authored a book called The Middle Path, alternative to the partisan madness.
We will charge you commission for.
It's just that out of our 12 publication, that's the slowest in sales. So maybe it's showing some. Anyway, I got 3 comments and recommendation. I like the foreign policy starts at home. I'll probably buy the book. I think it comes from a very important concept that our brother that said that you have to change yourself first. This is where we need to be honest on both sides. For example, instead of checking out, like for example, if Pakatan Rakyat, for example, instead of pointing the finger at Barisan Nasional, you should check your own people, your friends in the past, for example. Are they in the same book as you in terms of Kalimantan? Stop looking at the external side. I think you should do that. Barisan Nasional should check your own people. I think you should be honest on both sides. When we say foreign policy starts at home, check yourself first. Number 2, I'd like to talk about maybe the West and GMMF. Please understand that we are not just against individual organizational terrorism, we also disagree with state terrorism. Please do not pick and choose. We don't like to be toast. Thirdly, about the leaders. Personally, I don't think the politicians can do much. Right now, the politicians are very weak in Malaysia. We need to engage the royalties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see the lady on the other side. Yes, please. And then I have Kenneth and Zain.
Hi everyone.
Sorry. The lady, Kenneth and. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My question relates to 2 points. I'm Nohalida from Maputra. My question relates to 2 points which were raised earlier this morning. Firstly, that there is a need to define specifically the values of moderation in order for the concept of moderation to be workable. And secondly, that the primary objective of moderation is to address issues of extremism and bigotry. In relation to the second point, perhaps we should recall that issues of extremism and bigotry have been addressed by the human rights language since 1948. Unfortunately, despite human rights being recognized as a universal norm, human rights advocates have failed to translate human rights or the parameters or the boundaries of human rights into something which is acceptable to all mankind. Hence, we still face issues like religious intolerance and defamation of religions, and issues relating to the right to self-determination. Case in point is the suffering of the Palestinians. Despite more than 6 decades, the Palestinians still face issues of human rights. Despite the Universal Declaration of Human Rights being in existence since 1948, and despite the fact that the issue has been ongoing since 1948. Hence, the issue which remains at the crux of the concept of human rights still remains, which is what is human dignity. Given this scenario, and given the fact that the human rights language has failed to some extent to resolve issues that are still ongoing, my question is whether or what are the values that we need to promote in the context of moderation, taking into account the fact that the rights language has failed to some extent to resolve such ongoing issues, and whether or not such values should be used, should be utilized in order to make sure or in order to ensure that the application of human rights is applied in a way that is acceptable to all mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth.